Hello and welcome to another Jay's Politics podcast, part of the Podcast 99 Internet Radio Network. You can reach us at podcast99.org or me directly at jpoliticspodcast@gmail.com or me on Twitter at jpolypodcast or on Twitter and Gab at j_brown1981. And today we're going to be discussing a follow-up to my Sargon avocado and Patreon story video that I did almost a week ago, maybe a little less than a week ago. Following up specifically with what Patreon has done. Now, I know that this is probably one of the most talked about stories on YouTube right now, amongst the political sphere, especially those of us that are not far left. We talk about it in a different light than those that are, how should I put, pro-free speech as long as it's my speech type of people, which is fine. I mean, that's their choice. That's how they want to call free speech. But those of us that actually believe in here in the United States, the First Amendment right of free speech versus those that want to talk about it kind of flippantly is entirely another thing. Pardon me, just had a little bit of burp there. Sorry. Anyways, I was planning on doing a live stream about this, but I decided not to, just in case something happens, with sound or anything like that. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll notice that I posted a tweet about this last night, about 20 hours ago. You'll see right here. At Patreon, you call this context, and then the link to what we'll be discussing here in just a moment. What about how Sargon was being treated before he said what he said? How about the fact of whom he was talking to? How about where did this take place, as in whose channel? And why don't you just tell us how you really feel? Jealous of his reach? And I've got no analytics on it, which is fine, but that's fine. But what I wanted to talk about is this article from Catlin about the hate speech on Patreon on Medium's on Medium.com's webpage, under the section of artwork behind scenes at Patreon. From what it looks like, this is hosted on Medium, is what I'm trying to say. So, no point in me beating around the bush. I just think this is a bunch of garbage, but we will go over it. I'll also be talking a little bit more about some other things, but I first want to preface all of this with I talked about Leor Lester's brief YouTube video last time before he had a chance to do his live stream, where he discussed about Sargon and Patreon and how he feels that as a tech lawyer, he's well aware of how terms of use, terms of service are used, how community guidelines are used, generally done as vaguely as possible to allow wiggle room for the companies, and that he feels that the company is within its rights to do this, not necessarily that they are right, just that they are within their rights. Okay, I still disagree with him. That is not. It's not something that I think is accurate. I think they don't have the right to do this under their terms of service, and I'll go over that. I do have their community guidelines as well as their terms of service pulled up here. So let's begin with Hate Speech on Patreon by Catlin. Now, I was, like many things that go on the internet, things that receive a lot of backlash can tend to disappear from the average person's ability to grab it. So I left this left this page up all night and left the link up. So here we go. Some creators and patrons have questions regarding our removal of Sargon avocado for hate speech. We take a strong stance against hate speech and want to be sure that everyone has the full context regarding this removal. I'll go over what they call full context here in just a minute, but I don't agree with it. And by the way, before we get into the specifics, I'd like to warn you there's some inflammatory language, i.e., trigger warning. In an interview on another creator's YouTube channel, Sargon said, and this is quoted from the video, which I haven't been able to find. I'm going to try and dig up before I post this, but I might not. If I do find it later, I will make an addendum to my description below. Quote from Sargon: "I just can't be bothered with people who choose to treat me like this. It's really annoying. You're acting like a bunch of N-words. Just so you know, you're acting like white N-words. Exactly how you describe black people acting is the impression that I get dealing with the alt-right. I am really just not in the mood to deal with this kind of disrespect." End quote. Now, this quote from Sargon doesn't tell us, isn't full context at all, and neither is this second part of it here. For those of you watching on the video, this context, and I'm air quoting around context here, is just his words. They don't set the stage. They don't say he was being treated like this, like a far leftist, like an SJW or anything like that, and this is how he retaliated. It doesn't tell you why he did what he did. It doesn't give you the tone of voice. You don't hear Sargon's actual voice tone, vocal tone. So, next section is also a quote from Sargon. Quote, "Look, you carry on, but don't expect me to have a debate with one of your... Don't hate me, YouTube. Sorry, this is out of quote here, but don't hate me on this, YouTube, but faggots." Continuing on with the quote here. Faggots. Like, why would I bother? Maybe you're just acting like a N-word, mate. Have you considered that? Do you think white people act like this? White people are meant to be polite, respectful to one another, and you guys can't even act like white people. It really amazes me." End quote. Now again, I could have used, when I was reading the quote here, you can clearly read what he's trying to say. Right there. Censoring it is not free speech, to be honest. Now, the reason why I prefaced before I said it, don't hate me, YouTube, don't strike me, YouTube, that type of thing, is I'm trying to give you the context of what he's saying, why he's saying it. And what it is he was doing this live stream on another person's channel, being attacked by those that are of the alt-right white supremacy group. He's literally calling them out on how they call people and telling them, you're acting just like the people that you call out. You're acting like what you portray. Now, this context that I'm providing here, and really wish I could have gotten the video. If I can find it before I even edit this, I will throw it in there. But the context of this shows, the context that I'm trying to provide shows that he was being bullied, he was being attacked. Not just taking his words, not giving you the tone of voice, not giving you anything like that, just literally his words out of context in a vacuum. If this was all I was presented with, I never heard another side of the story, I would almost buy Patreon's excuse here. But I don't. And it's because of what they go on to say. Some people worry that we are reviewing content not posted on Patreon. As a funding platform, we don't host much content, but we help fund creations across the internet. As a result, we review creations posted on other platforms that are funded through Patreon. Sargon is well known for his collaborations with other creators, and so we apply our community guidelines to those collaborations, including this interview. In our community guidelines, we state that we do not allow hate speech. Part of how we define hate speech in those policies is, and before I go on to those, I have to make it clear that when Lauren Southern last year lost her Patreon. Not Jack Dorsey. What's his name? The CEO of Patreon went on the Rick Rubin show and said, "We will not be looking at how you act, how you conduct yourself on other platforms." I'm paraphrasing there because I don't have the exact quote. Maybe I can find that part and edit it in here. We'll see. But the point is the fact that your CEO said last year that you would not be being reviewed on other platforms for your actions, for your content, says one thing. Now, I can also understand from a business perspective that as a crowdfunding platform, at the bare minimum, you should be policing the quote-unquote content that is his to begin with. His actual channel or channels. So, as a content creator, as somebody who creates stuff, I don't always consider what I do on other people's channel as necessarily my own. I will, if I feel like I'm going to say something controversial, say that what I'm about to say is not the view of the channel or blah, 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 and all that it's my own views. That's fine. So I can understand how Patreon would feel that this is their right to do this. However, Sargon's patrons didn't pay for him to go on there. He was asked by the channel owner. It's not his platform. He was defending himself against actual alt-right white supremacists. Should he have said the words? No, probably not, but he said them. I still don't agree with you censoring him, Patreon. You don't pay attention to you don't pay attention to what your image is looking like when you do things like this. So in their policies, they state, quote, hate speech includes serious attacks or even negative generalizations of people based on their race and sexual orientation. Also, and that's end quote. Also, quote, when reviewing an account for potential hate speech violations, we consider some of the following questions. Is the creator using racial slurs or negative depictions of a protected class? In this case, Sargon used racial slurs to insult others and specifically linked those slurs with negative generalizations of behavior, in contrast to how people of other races act. He also used a slur related to sexual orientation to generally insult others. Taken in whole, with all of the context, and this is the biggest issue I have in this entire article, with all of the context, this violates our community guidelines. Bullshit, Jacqueline. This does not, Jacqueline Hart. This does not violate your community guidelines. And I will go over those in just a second. Just a quick update. This was updated October 17th, 2017. And I will probably refresh it just before we go on, just so people can see. We understand that some people don't believe in the concept of hate speech and don't agree with Patreon's removing creators on the grounds of violating our community guidelines for using hate speech. We have a different view. Patreon does not and will not condone hate speech in any of its forms. We stand by our policies against hate speech. We believe it's essential for our Patreon to have strong policies against hate speech to build a safe community for our creators and their patrons. And that's the end of the article. Now, here's the thing. It's not that people don't believe in the concept of hate speech per se, as it is that hate speech is such an ambiguous term. And hate speech as a term, when dealing with rules, is not applied fairly or evenly. And a lot of it has to do with what the social justice movement calls any ism that they're against, racism, sexism, etc., is that it takes power and prejudice. And the problem with being white is you're automatically assumed to have power over everybody else. Because of your white skin, you're privileged. Oh no, that's not. It's not power and prejudice. It's privilege and power. Sorry, I got that wrong. Um, but the fact that it is considered privilege and power, I have no power. I have no authority over anybody, except for when I'm at work and I don't treat any of my employees unfairly. And I'm not even the manager. I'm not even technically the assistant manager. I'm the most senior non-management position in my store. And yet I'm asked to help out as a part of management because I know what I'm doing. And because I have two people that are minorities in the sense that they are people of color specifically. One is a Haitian immigrant, the other one is a Samoan. Doesn't mean that I treat them any worse or any less of a person than I would anybody else. I don't treat them any differently than I would treat anybody else. And I treat everybody that I work with one simple truth. You respect me and I respect you, and we'll get along just fine. I will teach you what I know when you ask me to teach you what I know, and if I know that I'm supposed to teach you something. Those are the things that, when it comes to hate speech, because I have my privilege of being white and my power as being senior, I'm therefore automatically guilty of everything under the sun when it comes to hate speech, racism, etc. Automatically, whether I've done anything or not. It's automatic. Okay? If I say anything negative about a person of color in a response video, it is considered hate speech. But if they were to say something derogatory towards me for no reason other than the fact that I responded to them and disagreed with their opinion, and they used, what the guidelines say, that includes serious attacks or even negative generalizations of people based on their race and or sexual orientation, they won't get flagged. Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, they all apply hate speech against white men that are not of far left opinions far greater than they do those that are on the left. I'm not going to say that they don't do it to the people on the left. It's just not as serious until there's an actual threat to violence. And even then, sometimes it's questionable if they're going to do anything until a mob incites. But we're going to go on to the community guidelines. And like I said, you can see here, I'm refreshing. The page clearly states, last updated October 17th, 2007. Come on, stop being slow. Oh, this is... Oh, done refreshing. Still October. The TLDR, please be respectful, blah, blah, blah. Now, they have their authenticity, copyright, bullying and harassment, hate speech, adult content. And people who can't use Patreon, harmful and illegal activities, spam and doxing. All of these I generally could agree with, including the quote-unquote hate speech, as long as they're going to be applied equally and fairly across the board. So, how these guidelines are enforced. Please realize that Patreon is a diverse community, and while you may not necessarily agree with somebody's points of view, it may not be a violation of our community guidelines. That said, when you see a page on Patreon that you feel violates our community guidelines, please take time to report them via our reporting tool. You can read more about how to report a creator or post here. The Trust and Safety team will review the report, and if community guidelines have been violated, the team will get in touch with the creator to let them know. This is a commitment to creators. We are different from other companies. We know this is your livelihood. We invest heavily in making these decisions. We always want creators to feel like they have an open line of communication. So how does this translate to content moderation? Our first reflex is always to try and educate creators to help them understand the rules, how a rule has been broken, and how to remedy the issue. In the case where the violation is particularly bad or intentional, we may take further action as suspending or removing their account. In the most extreme cases, we will ban a creator from using Patreon. No matter what happens, we always give the creators the opportunity to appeal the situation by contacting us and sending any relevant information they do not believe was considered, and we may not change our minds, but we always listen. This last part is what always gets me in these things, is that it's up to them. It's up to you to prove your innocence. It's not innocent until proven guilty. It is prove your innocence. And if it has to do with feelings, you can't prove feelings. I felt offended by this. Okay, we're going to suspend this creator. Well, what did I do? You made somebody offended. Well, how do I challenge this? Well, you got to prove that you didn't offend them. How is that supposed to work? Honestly, Patreon, how is that supposed to work? Be safe, be respectful, yada yada. I mean, this is literally, it's literally a rephrasing of this. So we're going to go down to the hate speech. Content creators, Patreon connects, can't speak today. Patreon connects creators to their patrons all over the world, global platform built on promoting creativity, which makes this a very inclusive group. Therefore, there is no room on Patreon for hate speech such as calling for violence, exclusion, or segregation. Hate speech includes serious attacks or even negative generalizations, and they've quoted all this. And I don't fault Jacqueline Hart for this in her thing, because this would be a long sentence to add in there. Negative generalizations of people based upon their race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, sex, gender, or sexual orientation, age, disability, or serious medical condition. I understand why they cut that all out. That's fine. But, that reminds me, going back to Sargon's quotes here. Sorry to jump back here like this all of a sudden, but another thing about their quote-unquote context is the use of ellipses here. That tells me that he might have said something there that might have actually defended what he was doing or what he was saying. Not to say that he did, but this puts a seed of doubt in my mind that you are actually taking this concern fairly, Patreon. When reviewing accounts for potential hate speech violations, we consider some of the following questions. Does the content have historical or educational value? For example, we don't allow the use of swastika for propaganda or promoting hate, but it would be acceptable to use in an educational video to talk about Germany under the Third Reich. I wonder if it would also be acceptable to use as a swastika when discussing the history of the swastika and what it truly means, not the perversion that everybody associates with it. Is there a call for violence against a protected class? Does the creator glorify a ground that has known to support Does the creator glorify a group that is known to support ideologies that would be classified as hate speech under this policy? Is the creator using racial slurs or negative depictions of a protected class? This is not an exhaustive list, but we want to be transparent of how we work in gray areas between speech and action. That's just it. When it comes to speech is free or it's not. There is no middle gray ground. Either you support free speech or you don't, which clearly Patreon does not. Patreon wants you to go with what they say, nothing else. Fine. But what can I say? What can I do? There's a fine line between political comments and hate speech. It's not that I don't believe in hate speech. I just don't believe that it is applied fairly. And until it is applied fairly across the board against everyone by platforms like Patreon, I won't really acknowledge it as an issue. Political comments, yes. There is a fine line between political comments, harassment, call to violence, things like that. But you have to take into context the whole conversation, not just one party's side of it. Who can't use Patreon, talking about kids, and that's their community guidelines when dealing with hate speech. Let's move over here to the terms of service or terms of use. And let's go up and take a look at the date. I totally forgot to scroll this up earlier. So, this does not show when it was actually updated up top. So let's go down to the bottom and see if it does it. Now, as of the time of me starting this recording, I had this up, effective November 1st, 2016, last updated September 4th, 2008, before Sargon was banned. So let's refresh. Shall we? Oh, last updated on December 18th. How much you want to bet that they have changed it somewhere? I should have read through it before I update it, but it's all right. So we'll go up to the top. These are Patreon's terms of use. Stick with us here. We know that most people are skimming through terms of use statements because they're boring and go right over our heads. But we've done everything we can to make this easy, and at the beginning... Okay, so... By using Patreon, you agree to these terms of service. Patreon is a platform, therefore we are not responsible for the quality, timing, or legality of content or rewards. We may sometimes make changes to these terms, which is fine. Create an account, you must be at least 13 years old. User contact, don't do bad stuff, don't do illegal activities, no abuse. Don't dox somebody, don't do fraud. Do not impersonate somebody who you are not, so i.e., I can't go making a Sargon of a COD account when I'm not Sargon. Username squatting, don't create an account to prevent others from using the name or to sell the name. Don't infringe upon others' intellectual property rights. Don't spam, malware, endorsement. Don't claim endorsement by Patreon without our prior written approval. Don't crawl, scrape, or otherwise index information on Patreon. If you're doing this to create a useful feature, then we may allow it, but you must check with us first. Reward sharing, reverse engineering. Do not take apart Patreon to go figure out our secret sauce. If you want to do this as a part of our bug bounty program, then please be invited through. Yeah. Anyways, about being a patron, an actual patron, how to pledge your money. About being a creator. Creators launch a page that allows patrons to support them. You appointed us as your agent to collect and process payments on your behalf. Our fee is 5% of all your pledges. You are responsible for any taxes you owe based upon the payments you received. You must follow our rules about contents and rewards. To become a creator, you must convert your regular account to a creator account or directly make a creator account page and launch it. You may choose to charge patrons per month or per creation. In either case, most payments are processed at the start of each month. In connection with your charges to your patrons, you appoint us as your limited agent for sole purpose of receiving, holding, and settling payments to you. As an agent, our receipt of funds from a Patreon from a patron on your behalf is the same. Wow, I totally just is the same as receipt of funds by you directly, and only you'll have recourse against us, and not against any patron for failure for us to settle the funds. So, 5%. I'm sorry, I'm just reading through because I don't want to read all of this, but this is what they're talking about: the fees, the VATs for the EU and other countries that use the VAT tax. They've got a guide. We restrict some types of contents and rewards. You cannot create any content or rewards that with real people engaging in sexual or violent acts, i.e., don't say you will give somebody something, oral sex, or you're going to beat them if they don't do it. Come on now. That's just self-explanatory. Create any content or reward with nudity or realistic depictions of sexual or violent acts unless you are flagged as an adult content page. Make the post only viewable by patrons. Use raffles or any prizes based on chance as a reward. Create content or rewards using others' intellectual property unless you have written permission to use it, or your use is protected by fair use. So, yeah, if your patrons that are under, if your potential patrons are under the age of 18, please remind them that they need permission to pledge. Anyone under the age of 13 cannot have an account. We are not party to agreement between creators and patrons. If a patron requests a refund from us, we will only grant it in exceptional situations. We will deduct the refund from future payments to you. That makes sense. This is Patreon's role. Account disabling. You can disable your account. We can disable it at our discretion. You can permanently disable your account at any time by heading into your account settings. You can see information is deleted. We can terminate or suspend your account at any time at our discretion. We can also cancel any pledges and remove any content or rewards at our discretion. These terms remain in effect after your account is disabled. Your content. You keep complete ownership of your content, but you give permission for them to use it to promote themselves. Patreon's content. You can use our content as part of Patreon, but you cannot use it for anything else without our permission. I.e., you can use their link, you can use their logo when you are using it in your video and you are a creator. If someone on Patreon is using your copyright material without permission, please send an email to copyright@patreon. This is complicated, so make sure to read the long version before you send us an email. If you believe that any content on Patreon infringes, please send a written notice to. You may also send a notice to copyright agents for the UK and European area. This notice should include the following information: electronic or physical signature copy. Still going on about this. Your consent. If your content has been removed because of a DMCA notice, but you believe the content was not infringed of another's copyrights, you may send a written counter notice. Indemnity. If we are sued because of you, you have to help pay for it. It's pretty much what indemnity means. Warranty disclaimer. We do our best to make sure Patreon is working as expected, but stuff happens. Honestly, you can't do that. Limited liability. If you lose money as a result of using Patreon, any payments to you is limited to how much you have paid us, and we don't have to pay you if your loss is unexpected. So this is interesting. To the extent permitted by law, we are not liable to you for any incidental, consequential, or punitive damages arising out of these terms, or your use or attempt to use Patreon. To the extent permitted by law, our liability damages is limited to the amount of money we have earned through your use of Patreon. We are specifically not liable for losses associated with failure to deliver rewards or losses caused by conflicting contractual agreements. For this clause, we and our is defined to include our affiliates, officers, directors, employees, agents, and third-party service providers. This is interesting. So to all those creators that lost patrons and lost money, you can't go after Patreon because of their action on Sargon. I mean, come on now. Sorry about the slouching there. It's just getting dispute of a resolution. We encourage you to contact us, and we encourage you to contact us if you have an issue. If a dispute does arise out of these terms or related to your use of Patreon, and it cannot be resolved after you talk with us, then it must be resolved by arbitration, which is unfair for Sargon. Can't actually sue. He could go to arbitration for it. It must be administered by the JAMS under the JAMS streamlined arbitration process. This clause does not limit either party's ability to seek injunctive or equitable relief for disputes relating to intellectual property or proprietary data. Governing law is saying that all disputes must be resolved in San Francisco under California law. Everything else, these terms are the final word of Patreon's policy. These terms These terms and any referred policies are the entire agreement between you and us and supersede all prior agreements. If any provisions in these terms is to be held unenforceable, the provision is modified to the extent necessary to enforce it. If the provision cannot be modified, it is severed from these terms and all other previous provisions remain in force. All right. Anyways, the update. Oh, they have prior policies. Let's open that up and see what it shows. Older terms of service. Come on. Last updated May 23rd. Or May 2013. I have to admit, I like the pictures that are done in the other one better. Huh. There's a newer version of this document. And it should take us right back to where we were before. Which is right here. Yep. So I'm not too worried about it. Yep. So, let's see if it's... Yep. Same update. So, long story short. Patreon, you're screwing the pooch here. You're treating Sargon as if he's the enemy. You're treating Sargon as if he's done you wrong, and he hasn't. You've taken him out of context while claiming to have him in context. You don't know what you're talking about. Now, I respect that there are lawyers out there that will disagree with me on my points, and that's fine. They know the law better than I do. And I'm not trying to sit here and say that I am a lawyer, that I understand all of this. I have read a lot of terms of use. I've read a lot of things, which is why I generally don't stream games and stuff. That's why I don't generally do a whole lot of stuff until recently when I started getting more comfortable with understanding how it all works. With Patreon, I don't think that they're following their own terms at all fairly. Because again, if they were, they would have allowed Sargon his opportunity to appeal. He posted a follow-up video after my video where he actually where he said, I want to start the dispute process, which is where I got the information about how you have to basically prove your innocence when you've offended somebody. Well, how do you prove that you didn't offend somebody? You can't prove a negative. You know, in the context of emotions and things like that. So, honestly, I just feel that we need to have these terms of services be beneficial to the companies, obviously, because they need to be able to terminate bad apples, bad seeds, definitely. But we also need to start thinking about how to defend our rights to free speech. How do we defend the inalienable human right, not just here in America, but around the world, that we all have the right to free speech, that we have the right to express our opinions. People have the right not to listen to our opinions. I don't sit here and force people to watch my videos. I don't try to sit here and force people to do anything with my videos. If they watch them and they want to engage me, fine, great. But let's have the discussion. Let's agree. Let's, have our discussion and agree to agree or change our minds or just agree to disagree once we get to the point where we're not going to make headway. I try not to use foul language or offend people, but sometimes, things slip, especially when somebody's not hearing the other side out. That's the whole point about conversations. That's the whole point about debates. And as I ramble on here, I just got to say, please, Patreon, YouTube, Twitter, review your terms of use. Review your guidelines on hate speech. Review your policies on termination. If I can find anywhere that I can find legitimate, reasonable data that shows that there are more quote-unquote right-wing people being terminated for violations of terms of service for things like hate speech and whatnot, and yet I can find examples of the same type of actions being done on the left, and it's not being applied, then why should we do this? For my audience, if you're whether you're a fan of Jordan Peterson or not, or Rick Rubin, Dave Rubin, I can't remember anyway. Rubin of the Rubin Reports. They're actually trying to figure out how to make their own. They're trying to make their own payment services to allow places like Subscribestar, who's now under attack because of people like Sargon going to them. PayPal, Stripe, have a little backbone. These people have the right to earn a living through the internet just as much as anybody else does. Just because you process a payment for somebody doesn't mean you support their ideology. Doesn't mean that you support their things. You've entered into a contract to allow these people to make money. There are ways to get around it. If you have to, as a content creator, set up a post office box here in the U.S., or I don't know how it is done in other countries. Set up a post office box and have people submit money orders to you. Have people do things, and don't make it publicly known. Like, have them dress it up so it's not just the money order in an envelope. Figure out ways to do this. That's what we need. That is what we need to do. So find out. There are ways that that people can get you the money, and you can get money from them. So let's think about that. Let's work on it. And I think I'm going to start sitting down and thinking out how to make an internet bill of rights. I don't know about you, but that seems like a pretty good idea to me. We have a bill of rights here in the U.S. Let's get a bill of rights on the internet to protect speech, all speech, because even if it's bad speech and you disagree with it, challenge it, debate it, prove them wrong. Don't just don't sit there and be like, well, I don't like it because it's bad. Try to change the person's mind. Some people you're not going to be able to, but that is fine. The more you show that their point of view is silly and pointless, the less we have to do. The less people are going to believe in it. Take a look at the flat earth movement right now. It's quote unquote growing, but yet most of the videos when you look at flat earth are response videos to flat earthers. So anyways, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy your time. Enjoy your week. This is Jay with another Jay's Politics Podcast, part of the Podcast 99 Internet Radio Network. Have a wonderful week.